Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
After 2 off days filled with rumors and breaking news, we have an actual hockey game to talk about. Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, a June 8th edition of the show presented by Betano. The game starts now at betano.ca. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. He is former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna joining me on today's show. Mike, what's up? You fired up for Game 3?
Yeah, I'm ready for it. I think I've had a couple nights to watch other stuff on TV, do a lot of cooking, and be insanely busy despite not really having what I feel like a lot to do. So that's the nature of having kids, Tyler. Hold off as long as you can.
Noted, Mike. Absolutely noted. Let's get into the hockey talk for today's show and start with Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals. It's not like, technically a must-win for the Florida Panthers, but come on, if they want any hope of winning the Stanley Cup, you need to get the job done tonight as the series shifts back to home ice in Florida. There's a lot of things that went wrong or that the Panthers, quite frankly, did wrong in the first 2 games of this series. We can talk about the odd man rushes, the quality scoring chances that they were giving up in bunches to the Vegas Golden Knights, the discipline that was lacking. A lot of people want to talk about the goaltending as well. On Paul Maurice's whiteboard, Mike, what's going to be number 1 on the list of shit we got to get right tonight?
I think it's protect the middle of the ice in the defensive zone and be smart about how we pinch at the blue line. Because right now, to me, those are the 2 things that are crushing the Florida Panthers. They've allowed too many odd man rushes just because they've decided to be hyper aggressive at times that have not panned out for the club. And they got to formulate a plan between Bobrovsky and his teammates, his defensemen especially, to keep those screens from happening in front of them. It's not just the opposing players of the Golden Knights. It's been his own players. They've got to communicate. Let Bob have the outside shot while the defensemen take the inside lane. It should be simple, but I think the Panthers have just been too horny, man. They're running at every puck in the defensive zone, double coverage, all that. So they got to clean up defensively. And then on the flip side of it, offensively, if the Florida Panthers don't start getting the puck on and off their blade quicker and getting some elevation on it, I don't see any success. It's got to happen. Right now, if you're going to look for the perfect shot, you're probably not going to get it. And the fact that the Golden Knights have pressured so quickly, the Panthers haven't had a chance to get the puck on their blade, take an extra second look. They've got to do it right away. Get it in the air, converge on the net. I'm really not even worried about the penalties, Tyler. I think that's actually been more of a late in the game phenomenon for the Panthers that's hurt them. They've got to tighten up defensively, and then they just got to get pucks to the net quicker and more aggressively.
Yeah, and I do kind of like that point. It did feel like at times you said the Panthers were too horny. It's almost like a different version of squeezing the stick too hard, right? Where you're going out there and you're saying, hey, nothing's really going right for us, so I'm just going to try to make something happen. And then you end up doing something stupid. You end up making a bad pinch just because you're trying to be the guy who starts pushing things in the right direction. I think, as cliche as this sounds, simplifying for the Florida Panthers is probably something they need to do a little bit better tonight. And also, hey, Mike, I know you went on your rant earlier in the week about how it's not all on Bobrovsky, but him returning to his superhuman level would also go a long ways tonight.
Well, I think a big save early on would make a difference,
Yep.
and he's made several throughout the course of the game. But if they could get out of this first period, especially on home ice, either tied or with a lead, that might be everything for Florida. So, for me, it's really about, kind of letting the game come to them. I know they're an aggressive team. I know that's their MO. But I think they've overdone it so far. So a little bit more even keel, a little bit more methodical. I actually don't mind a close game between the Panthers and Golden Knights because the Panthers have been able to score at times when the chips are down. I like it if it gets tight and gets towards overtime.
This is a team that was down 3-1 in round 1 to the Boston Bruins, and they didn't blink. They didn't flinch. They got clutch goals from Matt Tkachuk, some big moments from Sergei Bobrovsky, and they found a way to work back in that series. 2-0 is not quite 3-1. So anyone saying the Panthers don't have a chance, Mike, I think is just a little bit foolish. Yeah, the scores were lopsided in games 1 and 2, but this Panthers team, to my point, has been resilient all season. And I really do think Paul Maurice is the right coach for this job too. I think he's going to have those guys in the right mindset tonight.
They need more of what they did in game 1. They were okay for that. Just that game was a little bit closer than the score reflects. Got out of hand at the end. Game 2, though, they can't repeat that, brother, because that was an atrocity.
We're going to talk about the 5-on-5 scoring and the special teams with our pal Jon Goyens, head coach of the Cape Breton Eagles, coming up in just a little bit. But let's talk about some off-ice news we got yesterday. Vlad Gavrikov and the LA Kings agreeing to a 2-year extension. This guy acquired at the deadline, came in and really fit like a glove. The Kings had nothing but right shot blue liners. Gavrikov came in and really steadied on the left side, even though their season ended in the first round. I think back to that series against the Oilers. He was dynamite defending Connor McDavid. He really was an important piece of that blue line, and they get him locked up for 2 years. There was talk that the Kings wanted to go longer, though, Mike, and that would have brought down the AAV. But Gavrikov, 27 years old, hitting UFA status at the earliest possible moment in his career, decides to bet on himself with a 2-year deal. Now, it's always funny to me to be like, oh, man, he's taking a risk. He's betting on himself. He's getting almost $12 million in his jeans. It's not exactly, the biggest gamble in the world. But what do you make of Gavrikov kind of turning down a longer-term deal, taking the 2-year option, and then being eligible to hit UFA status again at just 29 years old?
Well, listen, man, it is a big risk. Like if you're talking $12 million versus, I don't know, 40 something, like, dude, you're talking generational wealth when you start hitting those millions. That's like your kids not worrying about that, even though you'd like for your kids to make their own way in life. But I just think that this is interesting from the perspective of one, our own Frank Saravalli put a Billy on it that they were going to move a right shot D-man. They did with Sean Walker. Now they got Gavrikov, who did, like you say, he was awesome for them, but it's 2 years at 11.75. That's manageable. Thing is here, how does this affect the rest of the free agent market? Are more players going to look at the fact that they think the salary cap's going to go up big time in the next 2, 3, 4 years and do this type of deal? I mean, I'm looking squarely at Austin Matthews. I'm looking at other, RFAs that are out there, or even Ilya Sorokin. We talked about him previously, like these big names. Are they going to bet on the NHL, not on themselves? That's kind of how I see it. They think revenues are going to be up so much that if they just go and do their job for 2 years, boom, that next paycheck could be really big. So I think it's made it a little bit interesting because you got Caulfield on one hand, who took a long-term deal at under, $8 million per, which is a great deal. I think that could turn out to be a real value down the road. So it's some yin and yang stuff going on, but Gavrikov's deal is something I think we might see more of, especially with the belief that salary cap is going to be rising in the near future.
Yeah, I always look at it as I think the best time to hit unrestricted free agency is 29 or 30 years old, where you're still biting that prime and you'll get a GM to pay you for what you've done over the last couple of years. You're probably going to have a couple of years towards the end of that deal that are ugly, where you're out of your prime, but you don't mind getting paid big for those.
And you know what? Look at it this way too. If he takes a 2-year deal now, I mean, even if his next year is 4 or 5 years, if it's at $6 million per or more than that, like $7 million per, you're making more anyway on that same time frame, So it's fascinating to see how this has changed.
Yeah, really. And I look at Caulfield, I think it applies to Trevor Zegras. When you're 22, I think you're almost getting the best of both worlds. You sign that 7-year extension, you're getting brought to your age 29 season for a high-powered offensive forward like Zegras and Caulfield. I think you're getting the best. You're getting a huge paycheck, and then you're still going to get to hit unrestricted free agency. Frank was saying on the DFO rundown this morning that he thinks the cap could be at 100 million within 3 to 4 years. So when you look at Gavrikov, yeah, man, if it works out, it'll really work out. But I see Barra made a good point here in our YouTube chat. Look at John Klingberg. That's a guy who turned down 40, 50 mil from the Dallas Stars, and it'll backfire once in a while.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here is on the plane, who likes to sit at the poker table and who likes to watch their investments. Okay, because that's where we're at right now. You got two camps here. You got the gamblers and you got the people that are more conservative with their money. I would definitely take term over dollar any day of the week.
Yeah, it is interesting. Gavrikov bets on himself. We'll see what else the Kings get up to with some of their newfound cap space this summer. Let's head north of the border. Talk about the Winnipeg Jets. Specifically, Pierre-Luc Dubois reports that he won't sign an extension in Winnipeg from his agent, Pat Brisson. And this is tough. I really think, and I don't want to throw this word around, but I think Dubois kind of screwed the Jets, Mike, because all we hear is that, he wants to go to Montreal. He wants to go to Montreal. And regardless of if that's true or not, him sitting here a year out from unrestricted free agency saying, I'm not signing here again, them trying to get proper trade value for this guy is nearly impossible, because teams will sit there, specifically a team like Montreal, I'd imagine, and go, whoa, you want a first and a prospect and all this? If we just wait 12 months, we're not competing next year. If we just wait 12 months, we'll sign him for no assets in free agency. I think Dubois has really taken it to the Jets here. And honestly, I don't like it. I think it's kind of an unnecessary shot at an organization that gave up a lot in Patrick Laine to bring you in.
Well, as a player, he doesn't care what they gave up to bring him in.
Yeah,
he just wants what he wants.
Yep.
But this guy's under 25 years old, and he's already asked for a trade twice. Like, he's a flight risk. Like, why would you want that player on your roster? Okay, and like his play's been spotty too. There's times where he completely disappeared this year, and he is not beyond a second line center. For where he went in the draft, he should be a top flight first line center. He showed it at times in Columbus, and he hasn't reached that peak to stay there. So, does he think he's going to get more money? Is it just about playing where he wants to play? I appreciate that a player would like to dictate being somewhere they're happy.
Yeah.
But when you're on the market like this, how can you say, like, he doesn't have any trade protection? Like, Winnipeg could just go, you know what, man, screw you. We're going to send you off wherever we want to if they can't get much for him. I don't see that happening because he has, obviously, you want to get the most out of this trade you can. But, like, this isn't, you're going to want an extension in place if you trade for him.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't want to just give him a $6 million qualifying offer for assets that you give up and get 1 year out of it. So I don't know, man. Like, he's not worth Nazem Kadri money or term for me. That's $7 million. Is it just Montreal he wants to go to? Is that it? Like, he better have a longer list and more than one team or three teams if he thinks that this move is going to be anything palatable for him. And yeah, for Cheveldayoff, this is rocking a hard place. I'm interested to see how he comes out of it, because we saw Treliving we thought Treliving was in a terrible spot last year. And even though it doesn't look great with Huberdeau and Uyghur after the fact, that's a pretty good deal at the time.
Yeah, I think hindsight obviously changes that a bit, but it's also year one of that trade. And we've talked about it a bunch of times with Dubois. I mean, I think Winnipeg's going to be hard pressed to get good assets in this deal just because so many teams are going to say, we want to talk extension. And if they go to him and say, okay, 8-year deal, and he goes, no, I'm testing unrestricted free agency next year. Why would you give up anything significant for him unless you're a contender and you're viewing him purely as a 1-year rental? But I don't even know if that's worth the headache.
For an inconsistent player, that's a flight risk. That's the perception, and perception's reality. So Good luck, everybody.
Another big rumor that we've heard this week centers around Alex DeBrincat and the Ottawa Senators heading into a summer where he's a restricted free agent. There is talk that after just 1 year in Ottawa, he won't be signing long-term there. So the Senators are potentially going to be forced to move him this summer. It's a tough hand to be dealt if you're the GM of the Senators, which again, that position might be changing in a bit. So it's hard to read what they're going to do this summer, but focusing in on DeBrincat, which GMs around the league should be making a call to Pierre Dorian to try and make a move for this guy?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them. And by the way, this is a classic case of you better have an extension in place when you go for a big person like this on the market, right? Like you can't just roll the dice hoping you're going to keep them around. You better make assurances of it and trying to sell them. I tell you what, Carolina Hurricanes need a sniper. I think he'd be a good fit there. I think Rod Brindamore would help DeBrincat's game. Minnesota Wild, same boat. They need some additional scoring. Cap issues might be a little bit tough there, but I got my eye on one team, and it's his hometown state. It's the Detroit Red Wings. DeBrincat's due a qualifying offer of $9 million. He's currently at 6.4 for a cap hit. Well, I think that's really a question. Is he a 30 or 40 goal scorer? It's waffled a bit here, right? You're not quite sure. I don't think he's quite worth $9 million a year. But when you look at the Red Wings and what they could possibly put together in assets to get him, they have 2 first-round picks this coming year in 2023. They have 2 first-round picks, 2024, and look at the second-round picks that are loaded up, 3 of them in this year's draft as well. And, Larkin is the only big-ticket player on the docket right now for the Detroit Red Wings. He's going to be joined by Mo Seider in a year. But they got over $30 million worth of projected cap space sitting there. I think they could afford DeBrincat. I think he'd fit. They need a boost in offense. They also need a defenseman or two to round out that team. But I would like him in his home state. I think it'd be pretty good for him to head back home to Detroit. I'd like to see him play with Larkin.
Yeah, I mean, look at all those picks, right? If all Ottawa wants in return is just draft capital, Detroit can easily give that up. I think adding another high-end offensive piece there makes a lot of sense. I initially thought of the Canes as well. I floated that out to Jason Gregor and Frank Saravalli on the DFO Rundown. The new episode is out this morning, and they both kind of said, not high-end enough for what the Canes need. It would just be another kind of, good but not great, or great but not elite piece. The team I'm thinking of, and they have a ton of cap space. I think we have a board here with the top 8 teams in cap space for this summer. And I would imagine there's a handful of these teams who are looking to compete who will make a call. One team who just misses this list, though, is the Buffalo Sabres. This summer, about $16.9 million, but their roster is pretty much set. And the one thing that should be an area of priority for them is adding a scorer for that second line. Give Dylan Cousins like a good quality 30-plus goal scorer to play with, and I think your team gets a whole heck of a lot more dangerous. They have the money to sign him long-term. Next year, they're going to have like $40-some million in cap space. I think the Sabres would be an awesome fit for this guy.
Yeah, and he'd also probably be able to stay with his billets down the road in Erie from the juniors. That wouldn't be a bad deal.
Familiar with the area, but they have to keep some money aside in Buffalo for eventual Darlene and Owen Power extensions. But again, I'm just looking at their cap friendly. Next summer, they have $49 million in projected cap space if the cap goes up to $87 million. Almost $50 million with, again, a lot of key pieces. Samuelson, Thompson, Cousins, Tuck. These guys are all signed for a handful more seasons. I think DeBrincat would really fit in with that young core.
You know who's like a year too late right now, or too early, I guess I should say? It's the Blackhawks, a return. You know, like with Bedard coming in a year or two later from now, DeBrincat would probably be a perfect fit to go back there, but it's premature at this stage.
It's kind of funny, like a chicken egg thing. Like you get Bedard and then you go, damn, we need to surround him with good young talent. You traded Kirby Dach, you traded Alex DeBrincat, but then you go, okay, well, if you didn't trade those guys, would you have finished in the spot you did and then you wouldn't have gotten Bedard? Like you can talk yourself into a pretzel.
Keep the carousel going, baby.
Let's focus back on the Stanley Cup final. Game 3 goes tonight. Let's talk about what's been going on in this series with the coach's room. The Coach's Room with Jon Goyens. You can find him on Twitter at Gourmet Hockey. It's brought to you by UFC 289 coming this Saturday in Vancouver. 6 Canadians on the card, and you can watch it all on pay-per-view. John, let's start with maybe what Vegas is doing well, and it's scoring at 5-on-5. The goals are 8-3 in this series. Is this purely Vegas just being too much to handle, or is Florida making some mistakes here?
Well, you guys mentioned it at the top of the show with the odd man rushes and the bad pinches. Everything that their forecheck evolved in terms of versus Carolina, not giving up those odd man rushes, cutting those odd man rushes in half. Right now, at the rate that they're giving up odd man rushes, would have them 31st in the National Hockey League over a regular season. 31st, whereas what they did against Carolina had them in the top 3. What they're not doing is they're not doing that reload retreat. Pardon me, reload retreat, which they did against Carolina. The other part is they're dumping recoveries. They're a high dumping team, but they're recovering pucks at a rate that would have them in the bottom 5 in the league in the regular season. And then as we roll it here for Vegas, we know that they can score in various ways, and they can score. Here, though, watch the changes, right? The change is a little bit early. So Carrier comes off the bench a little out of sight, out of mind. But then it seems that everything that doesn't go right at the net right away creates a little bit too much chaos in terms of their D-zone coverage. And the old adage of, when in doubt, protect the house. Here, Vegas does a great job as usual. They shrink the zone. There's 5 guys in the picture. All that hockey coach lingo. And then you get this pinch. It's a long distance play. It's a hope play. Now it looks like a 2-on-2, but it's just not. Like Carlson's got way too much speed coming up the ice. Montour loses Amadio. And it continues. A lot of it coming from the offensive zone. Stahl half pinch. He's protecting the wall. The wall doesn't need protecting. Montour wants to switch with Duclair. I think he needs to buy Duclair a little bit more time. Now here comes the chaos, right? You should stop in the house. Where's the puck go? Right through the dot line. White Cloud moves to the inside. Duke's trying to block a shot. It's in the back of the net. Barbashev with a little pick, takes out Varhege's stick. Now you got a 4-on-3 rush. Keep them to the outside. No problem. Here's a 50-50. Shrink the zone. But again, they get to the house, but now there's the lack of awareness. Here's that aggressiveness in the neutral zone. Boom, line change, and bad line change on the backside for Florida. What do we got? A 4-on-3 rush. Now, they're going to keep them to the outside, but now it goes down to the low in the zone, and it's a bit of a broken play. What do? You protect the house. Now it's 1-on-4 for Nick Waugh, and he puts it in the back of the net. He should never even get to the slot at that point.
John, I played for a coach, Jordy Kinnear, who's the head coach of the Charlotte Checkers. We were in Springfield together, and man, all the time, every single day, 5 on a die, 5 on a die. He said this endlessly in the locker room, meaning 5 players that look like the dice and, where you needed to be in the defensive zone. That's been missing from the Florida Panthers. Now, coming into this series, you're big on the special teams, and Florida's power play coming into the Cup Finals was nearly at 28%. And Vegas's penalty kill had been the worst of the playoffs. Yeah, they'd faced Edmonton, but they hadn't been great in previous rounds either. So what have you noticed during special teams, and in specific Florida's power play?
Well, see, the thing is right now, Florida's 60% on offensive zone faceoff. So if you're going to do that, then have a quick strike plan, first and foremost, because the rest of it's not really working out for them. They are only 60% success rate on controlled entries. They're not. So what are they doing? Then they start dumping in pucks. So as we roll these clips, you're going to see what Vegas does when they win D-zone faceoffs. There needs to be a fourth guy jumping to nullify these easy clears, right? So right now, like I said, they're about 6 for 10 on the power play on offensive zone faceoffs. But these there's way too much time. It seems like they're reloading at 5-on-5, but in essence, they're on the power play. So here you win a faceoff. Sprint to the middle. I think Montour's got to drag Carlson past the midway point to give Barkov way more space. Same thing, Forsling, sprint or give it to Varhage and get over the halfway mark, giving Ekblad more time and space. It just becomes a one and done 1T. Now the entries here, stop on the drop. No one's got speed. You could kick it out. Well, what are you going to have to do? Now you're going to have to rim release. Pietrangelo reads that, bang, it's down the ice. Here, 3-on-3 rush. A little bit of a hope float type of pass. They get lucky, they keep it in. Rim release, what happens? They shrink the zone. Now all you see is a 4-on-2. You want to play quadrants on the PK. And Vegas is winning that. Here again, zone entry, bobbled puck, dump in. There's not enough pressure. Bennett is hoping on the half wall. He's not joining. They're not outnumbering. I mean, it does come down to simple math. You have one extra player. You've got to outnumber them. And again, 2-on-4. It's always now 4 versus 3 or 4 versus 2, in certain quadrants. Another dump in. Well, here they go. Shrink. What do you got? You got 4-on-2. And in this case, they're actually going to get possession of the puck. Now it's hoping passes through sticks and then forcing a bad shot, and then it's a one and done. And as we're getting to the tail end of this video, another puck placement. Well, what do you think we're going to see? 2 versus 4. So they've got to start doing a better job of figuring out quick strikes. Here, yeah, Montour's had a hell of a year, but I think this is a hope shot. You've got one of the hottest players in the entire playoffs, Tkachuk, just sitting there with a massive highway-sized lane or 2 lanes to come down his downhill side to create. I just think that the puck's not on their stick enough, and on face-offs and on opportunities off of broken plays, they got to figure out ways to get to the slot and get some quick strikes.
Love the insight as always, John. If I gave you a chance to redo your pick for this series with it 2-0, what would you say? How many games do you think the Panthers can win here?
They're gonna go. This is gonna go 7 in my opinion, and I think Florida's gonna chip away. I think what they did against Carolina proves that they're better than what they've done in the first 2 games.
As someone who's thrown a bit of money on the Florida Panthers in the series, I like your optimism, John, and I loved your insight today on the Coach's Room. As always, brought to you by UFC 289 this Saturday on pay-per-view, headlined by Nunez versus Aldana. You don't want to miss it, and you won't want to miss Jon Goyens every Thursday on DFO Live. Thanks for hopping on, John.
Thanks, guys.
You can tell how much I like those segments because when the video comes back, I'm like this. And I'm like, yeah. I'm so close to trying to watch my laptop to see what he's talking about. Anyways, let's move along to our hashtag AskDFO inbox question. We're scanning the YouTube for some questions, and you weren't on the show yesterday when we talked about Carter Hart's future, Mike. But let me throw this your way. What are some nice landing spots potentially for Carter Hart if the Flyers decide to move him?
Yeah, and this is apropos. I've got a piece out on Daily Faceoff right now. It came out this morning talking about Carter Hart and the projection that he could have still as a franchise goaltender. I think that Pittsburgh would be a great landing spot for him. I think he would solidify things there. I think you also look at Los Angeles if they could manage to fit that cap. I even think the longer play that could be very interesting would be Montreal. They still have to figure out who their goalie is going to be. Montembeault, he's kind of in flux right now. Jake Allen knows he's a placeholder there. So keep an eye on those destinations. And Carolina might even be one to consider as well.
Yeah. Jay Tess dropped in the hashtag AskDFO, and he wanted to know, when the Jets are going and moving Dubois, Hellebuck, Scheifele, Wheeler, should they be looking for draft picks, young prospects, or established players? I'm going to say young prospects. I think this is a team with Connor, Ehlers, Morrissey. I think the turnaround can be actually relatively quick in Winnipeg if they really nail a couple of good young prospects in this deal. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're going to need a mix of it. It's really tough to mine out young players without giving up a lot that are already under team control, at least. So shooting for one or two of those is a good bet, but I think you're also looking for those draft picks because, man, like the top end draft picks now, Tyler, they're in the NHL within 1, 2, 3 years. There's not the 4 or 5 year build out like it used to be.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move along to our Betano bets for tonight. We got a hockey game to wager on, so giddy up, courtesy of our friends at Betano. The game starts now at betano.ca. Can the Panthers make it a series? I'm not touching them on the money line. I talked about yesterday betting on Florida to win at least one road game in this series. I got enough going on the Panthers futures, so I'm taking 2 props in this hockey game, one of which is 2 for 2 already in this series, and it's the Mark Stone shot prop. He had 7 in game 1. He had 3 in game 2. The line is still set at 2.5, and it is still paying plus money, which means I'm wagering on it. I like this spot. Again, he's crushed it now in 4 straight dating back to the Western Conference Final, and if you're going to keep giving me plus money, I'm going to keep hitting this thing. On the Florida side of things, I'm taking the Matt Tkachuk shot prop. It's moved away from plus money. He's hit it in 3 of his last 5. He hit it last game after missing it in game 1. And at minus 105, I just think this is a solid spot. Back on home ice, I think Tkachuk's going to be looking to kind of be a leader on this team and really spark the Panthers. That'll involve throwing a ton of rubber towards the net. So give me Stone and Tkachuk on the shot props tonight. If the Panthers are going to win this hockey game, who's got to be the first star for them, Mike?
Oh, I don't know about first star, but I'll tell you this. Brandon Montour better have a point. He hasn't had one in 10 games. If the Panthers are going to win, he's going to play a big part. So if he's got a goal or an assist, I'll say that they get the victory tonight.
Fair enough. Let's wrap up the show with a little garbage time. What do you got?
This isn't garbage because I made most of my living in the American Hockey League, and tonight is the start of the Calder Cup Finals, and there's a real reason to keep your eye on this. I know at the NHL game you may not be keeping too close at tabs, but keep in mind it's going to keep going. It's the Coachella Valley Firebirds against the Hershey Bears. And, you look at this series, and it's kind of interesting because the Hershey Bears, they're more of a veteran team, which is typical of Hershey, coached by Todd Nelson. Edmonton folks may remember him from the Oilers. He's also a previous Calder Cup winner with the Grand Rapids Griffins in 2017. Unfortunately, I was on the other side of that losing effort with the Syracuse Crunch. No surprise. So here's his club. There's Dylan McElrath, the big man in the middle. He's got the biggest wingspan I've ever seen in my life as the captain of that club. And then you flip it over to Coachella Valley, and they are coached by Dan Bylsma. So Bylsma's taken a step back, became a head coach at the American League. I'm sure trying to bump back up to the National. But this is the Seattle Kraken's farm team. It's their first year in the American Hockey League. And they got some guys that are really good that are ripping it up. Young talent. Ty Cartier, you remember him from the Stanley Cup playoffs. He had 2 goals in Game 6 to eliminate the Milwaukee Admirals and go to the Calder Cup Finals. He was the AHL Rookie of the Year. Also keep your eye on a D-man, Riker Evans for the Firebirds. 16 points in 19 games in the playoffs so far. That leads D-men and rookies in scoring. He's a second-round pick of the Kraken. So somebody that you're going to probably see in Seattle sooner rather than later. There's some good prospects in this, and every year somebody comes of it. Our season, Tyler Bertuzzi was one of them. The next year, Robe Hintz. Like, you can always find somebody that's ready to take the NHL step from the Calder Cup Finals.
I was just sitting and scrolling through the rosters as you were doing all that. You're saying names like Dylan McElrath that I haven't heard in a while. I wanted to see who else was kicking around.
Well, there's some relics in there, man.
Oh, yeah.
all us old timers.
Yeah. Great stuff. Calder Cup gets going here. What a statement it is about the way Seattle's built things up as well. Hey, you think about having to start a farm system from scratch for you to be in the Calder Cup Finals this quickly. That is something.
Yep, good coaching and some good talent there. They've surrounded their young talent with good veterans, and Shane Wright's playing too. So there's another name to keep a track of.
Lots to watch in the Calder Cup Finals gets going. Of course, Game 3, Stanley Cup Final tonight. You and Frank Saravalli will be on the show tomorrow to break it all down. Shout out to everyone in the YouTube chat. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that. We're closing in on 6K. We want to get there by the end of the season. Shout out to our producer, Aaron Bordato, Jon Goyens at gourmet_hockey on Twitter. Give him a follow. And yourself, McKenna, for another great edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, noon Eastern.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.